Dear viewers, welcome all to the Roadshow Bidding 2020, a presentation of disclosure of the potential of blocks under bidding in the onshore basins of the Lower Congo and Kwanzaa. The Ministry of Mineral Resources, Oil and Gas of the Republic of Angola, through ANPG, National Agency for Oil, Gas, and Biofuels, presents the guidelines and some proposals for potential national and foreign investors in the oil industry. Ladies and gentlemen, to start, we will have the intervention of His Excellency, Minister of Mineral Resources, Oil and Gas of the Republic of Angola, Engineer Diamantino Pedro Azevedo.
Excelência, Senhor Secretário de Estado dos Petróleos, Excelentíssimos Senhores Administradores da Agência Nacional de Petróleo, Gás e Biocombustíveis, digníssimos investidores, parceiros do setor e convidados. Consciente da importância do petróleo e gás como recursos estratégicos e grandes contribuintes para o PIB, para as receitas fiscais e para a diversificação da economia do nosso país, o Governo lançou em 2019 a Estratégia de Atribuição de Concessões 2019-2025, que visa criar as condições para inverter o quadro de declínio de produção e reservas de hidrocarbonetos do país, que se vem verificando desde 2016. Angola tem uma história robusta, de muito orgulho e de grande relevância na indústria petrolífera, tendo estado a evoluir neste setor ao longo de várias décadas, com grandes descobertas de hidrocarbonetos em segmentos de onshore, shallow e deep water, atingindo nas últimas 2 décadas a posição de segundo maior produtor de petróleo em África. Consistente com a estratégia de atribuição de concessões acima referida, prossegue-se com a ronda de licitações de 2020, que aqui nos traz hoje, ronda esta composta por 9 blocos onshore, parte contínua desta estratégia que prevê atribuições de mais de 50 concessões entre 2019 e 2025. O grande potencial petrolífero destes blocos vai ser exposto a partir dos dados e informações que aqui vamos partilhar. Angola continua abençoada com grande potencial petrolífero. Apresenta-se com um setor petrolífero estável, competitivo e muito atrativo aos investidores. Estando ainda assim, o Governo, focado em melhoria contínua do ambiente de negócios, para que o nosso país seja o local de escolha para investidores locais e internacionais. Estamos todos familiarizados com os desafios causados ao setor pelos impactos do Covid-19 desde o início de 2020. Entretanto, graças à resiliência do governo angolano, a ANPG e os parceiros do setor, foi possível dar resposta a estes desafios de forma tempestiva por meio da implementação de iniciativas e ações de resposta à emergência que permitiram garantir a continuidade das nossas atividades no setor com mínimos impactos possíveis. Perante a deterioração do contexto econômico, devido a medidas de restrição de atividades e de isolamento social, assim como pela acentuada queda dos preços do barril de petróleo no mercado internacional. Com foco em assegurarmos a sustentabilidade contínua de produção e das atividades no nosso setor, estamos aqui hoje para dar continuidade à nossa estratégia de atribuição de concessões e reiterarmos o nosso compromisso em continuar a trabalhar conjuntamente convosco, os nossos parceiros, na melhoria do ambiente de negócio, criando as condições necessárias para continuar a investir neste nosso setor estável, competitivo e com taxas de retorno atrativas ao investimento. Por fim, permitam-me olhar para o futuro, reiterando que estamos otimistas quanto ao futuro do nosso setor em Angola e vamos continuar agressivamente com a nossa estratégia de atribuição de blocos nos próximos anos, de forma a garantirmos consistentemente o aumento do volume de atividades e investimentos no setor, de forma a mitigarmos o declínio de produção e reservas de hidrocarbonetos do país. Bloco a bloco, construiremos a Agência Nacional de Petróleo, Gás e Biocombustíveis e transformaremos o setor. Muito obrigado.
Angola cordially invites the entire world to follow this video presentation closely. A production that brings up a very explanatory approach, we will convey a compelling idea about the technical evaluation of the blocks, the data packet, the guiding aspects of legislation, environmental issues, logistical conditions, trademarks, and the global bidding process of the onshore basins of the Lower Congo and Kwanzaa. In order to reorganize the Angolan oil sector, promote transparency, and demarcate the roles of the stakeholders in the sector, regulatory bodies have been established to upstream, midstream, and downstream. These are all supervised by the Ministry of Oil and Mineral Resources and the Ministry of Finance, under the coordination of His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Angola, João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço. As a result of the recent restructuring in the oil sector, the National Agency of Petroleum, Gas, and Biofuels emerged, approved by Presidential Decree No. 49/19 of February 6th, with the function of national concessionaire whose duties are to regulate, promote, and supervise the Angolan oil sector throughout its upstream chain. ANPG's mission is to maximize and create value for the Angolan state through an efficient and responsible management of the oil and gas resources, with the vision to become an international reference entity, promoting in Angola a business environment of excellence and a place of choice for investors. In order to increase oil production, the Angolan government approved the General Strategy for the Attribution of Petroleum Concessions 2019 through 2025 by Presidential Decree No. 52/19 of February 18th. In this regard, the bidding strategy for 2020 was formulated, referring to the blocks of the onshore basins of the Lower Congo, Cons 1, 5, and 6, and the Kwanzaa, Cons 5, 6, 8, 9, 17, and 20. In order to elucidate investors about the basins to bid on, several aspects are presented in regards to technical assessments of the blocks, data packs, main principles of the legislation, environmental aspects, logistic conditions, commercial terms, and the bidding process. However, the 2020 onshore bidding strategy aims to reassess the oil potential in the Lower Congo and Kwanzaa onshore basins, relaunch the exploration and production of the hydrocarbons in the terrestrial areas of the Lower Congo and Kwanzaa basins, and to promote alternatives for accelerated development, mitigate the decline in production by increasing the activity of exploring and discovering new resources, investment funding considering the low risk involved, promote the incorporation of qualified Angolan labor, and promote the dissemination of knowledge, technological innovation, and good governance practices. According to the onshore exploration and production history, the first exploration records emerged in 1900, with the first exploration campaign taking place in 1915 on the onshore basins of the Lower Congo and Kwanzaa. The second phase of exploration in the referred basins was carried out in 1952. The first field in production, Campo Benefica, was discovered in the Kwanzaa Basin in 1972. In 1980 and 1994, the first and second generations of the production sharing contract emerged. As a result of socio-economic development in recent years, the conditions for sustainable investment are ensured, namely access roads, railways, airport, and sea. So we appeal to all investors who wish to invest in Angola. Throughout this session, your attention is highly requested because the blocks proposed for the current bidding round will be introduced. We are referring to the blocks located in the onshore basin of the Lower Congo, Cons 1, 5, and 6, and the blocks in the onshore basin of Kwanzaa, namely Cons 5, 6, 8, 9, 17, and 20. At this point, we will make a brief appeal to history. The first records of oil exploration in the onshore basin of the Lower Congo, with an area of approximately 7,653 kilometers squared, date from the 1900s. From 1915 onward, 8 wells were drilled, of which we highlight the discovery of oil in the Ngando well. From 1960 to 2011, different 2D seismic campaigns were carried out, covering approximately 7,685 kilometers. Likewise, 49 exploration wells were drilled, with 20 discoveries. This resulted in 17 oil fields and 1 gas field. The data to which we refer and on which this exercise has been based on will be detailed by the Data Archives Office. The onshore portion of the Lower Congo has been producing for over 40 years at the Albion level in the Pinda Formation. The FS and FST concessions unquestionably prove the existence of a functioning oil system. This is what boosts us to invite you to embark with the ANPG and jointly invest in the potential of the basin. We strongly believe that with the implementation of new technologies, it will be possible to maximize the discoveries and the production recorded so far. The Kwanzaa onshore basin, which covers an area of 25,000 square kilometers, has a similar history. Remember that the first phase of oil exploration began in 1910, comprising a more active phase between 1953 and 1997, which resulted in the drilling of 127 exploration wells and the development of 11 oil and 2 gas fields. The good news is that this production, in addition to Play Albiano, also came from the tertiary level, similar to Angola and pre-salt as it was with Biofuels. It should be noted that in 2010, a new 2D seismic campaign in high resolution was completed, covering an area of 1,600 kilometers, and the acquisition of gravimetry and magnetometry data over the course, covering 25,000 kilometers squared. That is the entire length of the basin. These data, available at the Data Archive Office, allows a better understanding of the oil system of the 2 basins, the Lower Congo and the Kwanzaa. In the pre-salt layer, the Bukumazi Formation is approved as the main source in the onshore basin of the Lower Congo. These reservoirs are made up of clay facies, while the Toka carbonate facies of the Barremian age are made up of Erva sandstones. Other pre-salt reservoirs are the sandstones of the Lukula Formation, which lies above the inconsistency of the basement. In turn, the Chela sandstones, which occur along the base of the salt, commonly known as the Loeme Formation, act as a regional seal of this play. The clay facies, equivalent to the Bukumazi, from the Red Kuvo and the Great Kuvo formations of the Berriasian to Barremian age have also been proven to be the main source in the pre-salt in the Kwanzaa onshore basin, with the sandstone facies of these formations attested as a reservoir. The limestone facies of the Kuvo formations operate as an intra-formational seal, while the evaporitic layer is a regional seal in the Kwanzaa onshore basin. At the post-salt level, the clay from the Pinda Formation of Albion age, as well as that of the Lab Formation of the Cenomanian to Paleocene age, are responsible for the generation of hydrocarbons in the onshore portion of the Lower Congo. On the other hand, the carbonate and sandstone facies are proven as reservoirs sealed by the intraformational clays of the Pinda, Lab, and Malembo formations. Regarding the Kwanzaa onshore basin, at the post-salt level, the following proved to be the source rock. The Bingo Formation of Albion age, which comprises limestone and clayey facies, the Kunga Gratidao Formation of the Eocene age that comprises the clay and marl facies, and also the Kifangado Formation clays of the Oligocene age. As a reservoir, we have the oolitic limestone facies of the Binga and the Katumbela Formation of Albion age, and the sandstone facies of the Kifangado Formation, and as a seal, we have the clay facies of the Binga, Kunga Gratidao, and Kifangado formations. For a better understanding of the geological phenomena that occurred at the level of the basins, the regional geological models were elaborated, which we now describe. In this regional geological model of east-west orientation, the main tectonostratigraphic characteristics of the onshore basin of the Lower Congo are illustrated, where we verify essentially 2 megalithostratigraphic equations, being the pre-salt and the post-salt. As a result of the rifting, which occurred with the opening of the South Atlantic and the separation of the Gondwana, it began to characterize the pre-salt as a system of normal faults, rooted in the basement, forming structures of the type horse and grabens. In the grabens, sediments rich in organic matter were deposited where the main source rock of the Biofuels Formation originates, and also the sandstones of the Lucala Formation, which are proven reservoirs in the offshore portion of the Lower Congo Basin. At the top of the horse, the carbonates of the Toka were deposited, and on their flanks, the sandstones of the Urva in the form of pinch-out, thus constituting other groups of probable reservoirs. The sandstones of the Chela Formation are also identified along the base of the salt, also proven to be a reservoir in this basin. It's an evapocarbonatic layer with a variable thickness, although of moderate form, and is responsible for the structuring of the albion characterized by syndepositional growth failures. It must be considered that the pre-salt of the Kwanzaa onshore basin is structurally characterized by the same system of normal faults rooted in the basement, which form horse and graben structures, resulting from rifting when the Gondwana supercontinent is separated. Thus, the geological history is the same. Sediments rich in organic matter are deposited in the grabens, where the main source rock of the Kuvo Formation is formed, and the sandstone reservoirs of the same formations. At the top of the horse, the carbonates of the Kuvo Formation were deposited, and on its flanks the pinch-out sandstones, thus constituting reservoir potential. In the Sag Basin area, the presence of the sediments deposited are found in a transitional environment rich in organic matter, likely to generate, and by sandstones and carbonates, microbialites from the Great Kuvo Formation, functioning as a reservoir potential. In the regional geological model of Kwanzaa, also oriented east-west, which we present to you, the thick salt formation has a variable thickness and occurs in almost the entire length of the basin, with a strong tectonic influence, forming walls of salt that contributed positively to the structuring of the entire post-salt. This halokinetic process, in addition to generating secondary accommodation space, which allows sedimentation in preferential areas, such as on the basin floor, directs sedimentation in the depositional system in small subbasins. It also creates high structural conditioning factors for the installation of carbonate banks on the platform. Thus, it was found that the normal fault with the listeric growth plan forming antiform structures define the albion level. The tertiary is marked by post-depositional extension faults, forming pit-like structures where the potential black marl deposited rock and the turbiditic channels were deposited as reservoirs, as observed, for example, in the Kalamboloka and Angola pits. The following slides will take us to a more detailed incursion of everything we have presented so far, bringing to light the geology and the prospective potential of each of the 9 blocks that are the reason for this great event. Based on the Con1 model derived from seismic profiles in the east-west orientation, the pre-salt is characterized by a moderate tectonism, forming horse and semi-graben structures on which sedimentary accumulations rich in organic matter are deposited, which is the generating rock at the pre-salt level. The sedimentary inputs deposited at the bottom of the grabens were sandstones that, in our sense of this model, constitute the probable reservoirs in the pre-saltiferous lithostratigraphic sequence, whose regional seal is the Lower Salt Formation. We also highlight a noticeable layer of sandstones in the Chela Formation, although not very thick in this block, along the base of the salt, also proven as a reservoir in the Lower Congo. The slight movement of the evaporitic layer created little structure in the post-salt, in which the albion is limited by normal faults and small antiform structures, as highlighted in the seismic line here presented. In this east-west orientation line, we have identified in the pre-salt level a possible multiple objective, lead 1 and 2, with reservoirs characterized by the Toka Coquinas type carbonates, located on a structural high and by the sandy layer of the Chela Formation that occurs along the base of the salt. The black shale on the Biofuels Formation may have fed those reservoirs. The combination of structural and stratigraphic elements form a mixed trap with four-way closure. Such occurrence is due to the influence of the structural top and the seal, represented by the intraformational clays from the Biofuels and the salt layer from the Loeme Formation. We also bring your most high appreciation lead 3 at the post-salt level, characterized by the reservoirs consisting of the oolitic carbonates from the Pinda Formation, potentially fed by the shale facies from the same formation, and/or through the salt windows that allow filling these reservoirs with hydrocarbons generated by the pre-salt. The Pinda shales act as a seal, and the stratigraphic component that combined with the characteristic Albion faults created a structural and stratigraphic trap with closure in 3 directions. Once again, using an east-west geological model, we conclude that the pre-salt is also characterized in block Con 5 by a system of normal faults rooted in the basement, forming horst and graben structures. It is noticeable in the western part of the model a horst on which the carbonates of the Toka were possibly formed, and on its flanks sandstones were deposited in the pinch-out, constituting probable reservoirs. The graben identified in the same zone indicates the presumed hydrocarbon-generated region. We also consider the geological model as a potential sandstone reservoir of the Chela Formation below the regional seal constituting the salt layer of the Loema Formation. This model is confirmed from the geophysical point of view through the interpretations of gravimetric and magnetometric data, as well as in the seismic line of the northwest-southeast orientation, where we identified a lead in the pre-salt with multiple targets. Tocas coquinas type carbonates, located on a structural high and/or by the pinch-out sandy layer form the Ervo Formation on the flank, are possible reservoirs and may have been fed by the black shale source of the Bukumazi Formation. This lead has a mixed type trap, structural and stratigraphic, with closures in 4 ways if you consider the cocaínas at the structural top. However, if you consider the sandy layer on the flanks, closing in 3 ways against the fault is applied. Both are sealed by intraformational shales from the same Bukumazi Formation or by the salt layer of the Loeme Formation. Like on the geological models presented, the pre-salt of block Con 6 follows the same stratigraphic and petroleum system principles on which the generation occurs in the graben, with the Toka carbonate reservoirs located at the top of the horst and the sandstones pinch out on its flanks. We would like you to consider the sandstone reservoirs of the Barian-Aptian age sealed regionally by the evaporites. Here we show the seismic line east-west oriented, where the lead one is identified in the pre-salt layer by a sandstone reservoir from the Chela Formation. The black shale generating rocks of the Bukumazi Formation may have fed these reservoirs. The Albion lead 2 is characterized by oolitic carbonates reservoirs from the Pinda Formation, potentially filled by hydrocarbons generated in the Pinda Formation shales, and a mixed trap influenced by the faults that may have compartmentalized the reservoirs and stratigraphically sealed by the intra-formational shales from the Pinda and/or the Lab formations. So stated, it is evident that blocks Con 1, Con 5, and Con 6 in the Lower Congo Basin have a strong potential to be explored in pre-salt and post-salt plays, in a region widely known as having a proven functional and active oil system. We guarantee that the land portion of the Kwanzaa Basin is no different, as we will shortly witness. The geological models that we bring and that illustrate the main tectonostratigraphic characteristics in the basin and in the blocks are all facing east-west. The highs and lows arising from the rift phenomena mark the structuring of the pre-salt, where the generation of hydrocarbons happens in the lows, and the occurrence of pinch-out sandstone reservoirs happen on the flanks of the highs, as they accommodate at the top of the carbonate reservoirs of the Kuvo formations on the top. Nothing differs from the previous and the following blocks. In Block Con 5, Sag Basin is clearly visible, where the presence of sediments deposited in a transition environment rich in organic matter, capable of generating hydrocarbons, as well as the sandstones and microbiolites, the Great Kuvo Formation as probable reservoirs are verified. The thick salt formation seals this sequence. The variable thickness of the salt layer over almost the entire extension of the block constitutes the main structuring element, at the post-salt level, creating an albion, anti-form structures, and rafts controlled by normal lactic waste growth. The tertiary is quite thick and characterized by the presence of a tertiary trough from Angola to the east and the Funda to the west, where black marls acting as source rocks and the possible reservoirs made up of turbiditic channels are deposited at the bottom. From the seismic line, we suggest the lead 1 of the pre-salt, identified at the SAG. Its reservoir is formed by the microbiolitic carbonates and/or the sandstone layer of the Grey Kuvo Formation, as confirmed by the Bon Jesus 1 well. These reservoirs may have been filled with black shales from the Red and the Grey Kuvo Formation. The lead has a mixed trap, structural and stratigraphic, with a four-way closure defined by the influences of the structural top and by the seal that is characterized by the evaporates of the Mastiff Salt Formation. From analogous to the Molenvos 5 well, stretches the post-salt lead 2 made of carbonates from the Albion Katumbela H Formation. The marls of the Bingo Formation identified by the Zango 4 well may have fed these reservoirs. The lead has a mixed trap with a four-way closure against fault, and the structure seal is defined by the intraformational shales of the Upper Cretaceous and Cabo Lidos Formation. The present model derives from two profiles, with north-south and east-west orientation highlights on the system of faults rooted in the basement, forming horse and graben structures characteristic of the pre-salt of the basin. The structural bottom of Kalambaluka illustrated in the arbitrary model is filled with the sapropellic sediments that contributed to the accumulation and preservation of the organic matter that forms the main source rock of the pre-salt, feeds the lacustrine carbonates observed in the structural top of Gelinquis, located in the east block, and lenses of sandstone on the flanks of the horst. Notice that the Sag Basin with all elements of the petroleum system occurs in a large part of the block. In this block, the salt tectonics had little influence on the structuring of the post-salt, whose tertiary is marked by the presence of tertiary pits that extend from block Con 5. In terms of prospects, the Con 6 is analogous to the others, as seen in the seismic line, with a southeast-northwest orientation. This is one reason why we will highlight only a few leads from the post-salt. The lead 1 at the Albion, characterized by a mixed trap, structural and stratigraphic, with three-way closure against fault, and by the seal defined by the intraformational shales of the Cabo Lido Formation, containing the carbonate reservoirs of the Bingo Formation, potentially fed by the shales of the same formation. In the tertiary trough, however, the turbidic channels with the mixed-type trap with a two-way closure, characterized by the lateral variation of facies defined by the intraformational shales and fed by the black marl rich in organic matter, laid through or even at the base of the Cunga Gratidao Formation by the shales from the Kifongando and Kuvo formations constitute lead 2. The regional geological model of east-west orientation of block Con 8 has a very faulty basis, forming structural highs and lows. Without much different to the previous block, the shales rich in organic matter deposited in the structural low were responsible for the generation of hydrocarbons that filled the pre-salt reservoirs, that is, the carbonates of the structural high as well as the sandstones on the flanks of the horsts. In the sniff zone, there are sediments deposited in a transitional environment rich in organic matter, source rock, and reservoirs made up of sandstones and carbonates, microbiolates, of the Grey Kuvo Formation sealed by evaporite with variable thickness from the thick salt formation, responsible for the emergence of structures and faults in the post-salt level. As for the tertiary, the black marl inside, the trough to the west, and our geological model constitutes the main source rock, which are mainly responsible for filling up possible reservoirs comprised by turbiditic channels. We highlight the seismic line of the southeast-northwest orientation on block Con 8, where we identified two leads in the pre- and post-salt being. The pre-salt lead 1, characterized by coquina carbonate reservoirs of the Great Kuvo Formation located on the structural high, most probably fed by the black shales of the same formation. It indicates a mixed-type trap, stratigraphic and structural, with a four-way closure, sealed by the evaporates of the massive sal formation. Lead 2 from the post-salt Albion's layer is characterized by oolitic carbonates of the Binga Formation, confirmed by Serpa-1 well. The trap is mixed with a four-way closure, and the seal consists of intraformational shales of the upper Cretaceous of the Cabo Lido Formation. The pre-salt in the regional geological model of the East-West Block Con 9 shows a very faulty basement forming horse and graben structures. Sandstones deposited on the flanks of the horse as well as the carbonates at its top probably constitute the reservoir sealed by the thick salt formation made up by an uneven thickness. In the post-salt, Albion is thick and nearly unfaulted. Otherwise, the tertiary is characterized by the presence of a trough to the west-filled cavity by black marls acting as source rock and turbiditic channels as reservoirs. With regard to prospects, a seismic line with southeast-northwest orientation was selected to show the prospectivity of Block Con 9, where two leads were identified. The pre-salt lead 1 with the four-way closure, mixed-type trap, structural and stratigraphic is characterized by sandstone reservoirs of the Great Kuvo Formation, which were deposited along the base of the salt, being fed by the black shaves of the Red Kuvo Formation. The Albion age in the post-salt lead 2 reservoirs are constituted by oolitic carbonates from the Binga Formation and those fed by Binga and/or Red Kuvo Formation shales. Its trap is also mixed, structural and stratigraphic with a two-way closure. The regional geological model was developed with the purpose of understanding the main structures that the block presents. As it can be seen as a result of the rift, normal faults rooted in the basement formed, as in the other blocks, horsts and grabens, whose depocenter are filled with large amounts of organic matter, potential sandstone reservoirs on the flanks of the horst, and carbonates at its top. We leave it to your interpretation. Although the structural maps are not included in our presentation, we invite you to consult the data package where one can clearly see fine sediments rich in organic matter that were probably deposited on the Makalunga Trough located in the southeast of the basin, constituting the main source rock of the pre-salt. While at the Lumbondo High located to the east of the block, lake carbonates were deposited on the flanks of the horst and sandstone lenses that sometimes pinch out in the horst fault plains constitute probable reservoirs. A sag basin is present in the block formed by the Great Kuvo source rock as well as the sandstone and microbiolate reservoirs of the same formation. Thick salt is a variable thickness and occurs in almost the entire block. In the post-salt, while the Albion is characterized by normal faults and antiform structures, the tertiary is represented by the presence of a trough to the east, Morro Listo Trough, and to the north, Kalombaluka Trough, filled by black marls acting as source rock and possible reservoirs on the turbiditic channels. The interpretation of the seismic line orientation southeast-northwest, Block Con 17 proposes two leads in the two main stratigraphic lithosequences. Lead 1 at the pre-salt level, characterized by sandstone reservoirs and/or microbiocarbonates from the Great Kuvo Formation and probably fed by shales from the Red Kuvo Formation. This lead has a mixed type trap, structural and stratigraphic, with closure in two directions. The turbidite channels in the tertiary trough on lead 2 may have been filled by black marls rich in organic matter, deposited at the base of the Kungo Gratidao formations, troughs, or by the shales of the Kifongando and Kuvo formations. The lead has a stratigraphic trap with a two-way closure. With the integration of the geological and geophysical data, it was possible to create the regional geological model for the description of the block's tectonostratigraphic characteristics. The very active tectonic at the pre-salt level originated the normal faults rooted in the basement, forming structures of horst and grabens type, where large amounts of organic matter are deposited in its depocenter. Sandstones deposited on the flanks of the horst and carbonates at its top constitute potential reservoirs. Despite the fact that the salt layer is a thin one, it provides an effective seal at this level. As for the Albion post-salt, these are characterized by normal flaws and raft-like structures. The tertiary is characterized by post-depositional extension faults and by the occurrence of the Morro Listo Trough in the west part of the block, where we can find black marls as source rock and turbidite channels as reservoirs. At the seismic section with southeast-northwest orientation, several leads were identified, although we are only showing these two from the two main lithostratigraphic sequences. In the pre-salt, we can notice lead 1 with the mixed trap that is structural and stratigraphic with a four-way closure, having coquina carbonates as reservoir, shales of the Red Kuvo Formation as source rock, and intra-formational shales of the Formation Kuvo, and/or evaporites of the thick salt formation as a seal. Regarding the post-salt, lead 2 at the Albion is characterized by oolitic carbonates from Binga Formation acting as reservoirs that may have been fed by the Binga and/or Kuvo Formation shales. It has a mixed trap with a four-way closure against the fault and a seal that is provided by the intra-informational shales of the Binga Formation and/or shales of the Cabo Lido Formation from Upper Cretaceous. Following our presentations, we will now address our data packages which have been thoroughly prepared for this bidding round and are also already available to be acquired, as well as the accessibility studies which have been carried out in each of the blocks addressed here. As it is of public knowledge, and also mentioned here before, for this year we have 9 blocks available for bidding, of which 3 are part of the onshore Lower Congo Basin and 6 from the onshore Kwanzaa Basin. The hydrocarbon exploration activity in our country dates back to the 1900s, specifically the year 1910. Since then, it has always been our main concern to store all the data and information resulting from this activity. Among this data and information stored in our huge data collection, we highlight the data and information related to geology and geophysics as well. Through these images, we can detail the geographic position of each of the blocks located inside the onshore Congo Basin. We can also see the seismic lines crossing each of these blocks displayed here, and the wells inside of the blocks we are currently addressing. We cannot leave out the fact that for this bidding, the first seismic campaign acquired ran in 2007, and the last ever ran was acquired in 2010. For your awareness on that same topic, the block with the largest 2D seismic coverage inside of the basin with the total... For your awareness on that topic, the block with the largest 2D seismic coverage inside this basin with a total of 395.05 kilometers covered in Block 6. These images illustrate different types of maps related to the onshore Lower Congo Basin magnetometry, and altogether will allow us to understand and archive the characterization of the basement from these rocks. Additionally, it will also allow us to identify existing magnetic minerals within the basin rocks. Similarly to what we've seen in the onshore Lower Congo Basin, these maps display the geological location for the blocks belonging to the onshore Kwanzaa Basin, as well as the seismic lines contained in each block. We must note that the largest 2D seismic coverage belongs to the block with a length of 448.33 kilometers. Similarly to what we just said concerning these blocks, the first seismic acquisition started in 1971, and the last one was in the year 2012. These images represent different types of maps related to the onshore Kwanzaa Basin magnetometry, and altogether will allow us to understand and achieve the characterization of the basement from these rocks. On the other hand, it will also allow us to identify existing magnetic minerals within the basin rocks. Regarding the accessibility studies, the approach taken is to acquire satellite images associated to fieldwork in such ways that allow us to create geographic data, base, and also elaborate atlases for each of the blocks presented so far. The results of these studies will assist our potential clients through the decision-making on future exploration and production works to be carried out in each of the blocks. We believe that with vast insight of data related to the block's geography, such as road access, hydrography, climate info, land use, etc. From these 3 main results we obtained, namely, geographical database creation, a database created from the ArcGIS app. However, our potential clients and investors will have access through other GIS apps, as the data and information in the database will be made available. Atlas. As known, the atlases are a grouping of maps gathered in a single book, and that is how we'll represent some of the maps that will be part of our atlas. GIS portal. Through this portal, our potential clients and investors will have visibility over all the data and information related to the accessibility studies. They'll have access to satellite imagery and all info resulting in the interpretation of these images, and all data and additional information used throughout these studies. As mentioned previously, this year's blocks are being bid for the Kwanzaa Basins and the Congo, and it is for this reason that we have two data packages, entitled, respectively, Kwanzaa Data Package and Congo Data Package. Each of these data packages have different elements in its composition, as for example, final geological reports, the description of the books, regional studies, geophysical data, well database, atlas of the accessibility studies that took place in each of the blocks, various maps, as well as the legal information, which is also part of the data packages, among other data. In short, the packages contain a set of information that will certainly help potential investors to make their assessments and have a better sense of the potential of the areas to bid. The Congo data package contains all the elements already mentioned. We must emphasize that this package has a total of 24 wells and a total of 57 additional wells. These 57 additional wells were strategically chosen in order to make a stratigraphic correlation with the other wells, and so obtain a better knowledge of the geology of the area in which the studies are being carried out. Within this package, we also have a total of 14 regional studies. Similar to the Congo data package, the Kwanzaa data package contains all the elements previously mentioned. It should be noted that within this package, we have a total of 49 wells, 36 of which refer to the Kwanzaa blocks under the bid, and also a total of 13 adjacent wells. These additional wells were strategically chosen in order to enable stratigraphic correlation with the other wells, and by so having a better understanding of the stratigraphy of the area in which the studies are being carried out. It should also be mentioned here that this package contains a total of 25 regional studies. To obtain the data packages, our potential investors must make a request, either by email or through the ANPG portal. Then they will be obliged to sign a confidentiality agreement in order to guarantee the integrity of the data and prevent it from being reproduced without ANPG's prior consent. Subsequently, potential investors must proceed with the payment of the data package, either by deposit or bank transfer. At the end of this process, ANPG will make the data package available via FTP file or another storage device. Now we will be addressing environmental protection issues in oil activities in Angola, more specifically about environmental management instruments in the oil and gas industry. The terrestrial basin of the Lower Congo, located in the municipality of Soyo in the province of Zaire, consisting of blocks Cons 1, 5, and 6, duly marked in yellow on the illustrated map, occupies an area of 7,000 kilometers squared, circumscribed by mangroves, forest mosaics, and other shrubs, with streams and tributaries that will flow into the Congo River. The Kwanzaa Onshore Basin, located in the municipality of Kwikama in the province of Luanda, consists of blocks Cons 5, 6, 8, 9, 17, and 20, as marked in yellow on the map, occupies an area of 25,000 square kilometers, of which 9,600 square kilometers correspond to the extension of the Kwikama National Park. The biodiversity predominantly presented in this area consists of dry forests and mosaic of the savanna, dense forests, and mangroves, as well as elephants, African forest buffaloes, roan antelope, among others. Now we will refer to the legal framework of environmental protection in the oil and gas industry in Angola. Based on the environmental management instruments in force, we have the 2010 Constitution of the Republic of Angola, where the concern and commitment of the Angolan state with the environmental preservation with the view to promote sustainable development is clearly expressed. Subsequently, there was an evolution in the creation of laws, namely Law 5-98, Basic Law on the Environment, and the Law 10-04, Law on Oil Activities, that generally reinforce the requirement of preserving the environment. Decree number 39-00 on the protection of the environment in the course of petroleum activities constitutes the specific regulation of the oil sector in the protection of the environment. The Decree 39/00 00 of December 10th about environmental protection during oil activities presents a package of legal requirements allowing operators to achieve efficient environmental management using tools such as assessments of environmental impacts for environmental licensing, submission plans for approval such as prevention and oil spill response plans, management plan, removal, disposal of waste plan, management of operational discharge plan, abandonment plan, and others. Moreover, the other decrees presented in this slide help guide for the implementation of plans mentioned above. In conclusion, the current legislation guide companies to meet the objectives related to the environmental protection. Strict compliance allows companies to carry out their commercial activities for the benefit of stakeholders while protecting the environment. Bids for onshore blocks in the Kwanzaa Basin will boost oil and gas exploration, development, and production activities. In the short and mid-run, the exploration of hydrocarbons in these blocks will open several economic opportunities for the country, such as promotion of the logistics chain, regional development, and promotion of local content, all of which can be implemented through the following initiatives. The creation of conditions for Angolan commercial companies to participate in oil and gas research and production activities in the terrestrial areas, taking into account the low or moderate level of financial effort required for the execution of onshore oil operations. The construction of new oil and gas processing, transportation, and storage facilities. The improvement of existing terminal and logistic bases to support exploration and production operations, or other existing industrial facilities and bases that can be used for this purpose. The creation of industrial waste treatment, infrastructures of common exploration, and opportunities to invest in transportation, real estate, trade, etc. Regarding the legal framework, we will start by referring to Law number 10/4 of November 12th, Petroleum Operations Activities Law, and Decree number 1/9 of January 27th, which approves Petroleum Operations Regulation, as it constitutes a remarkable legislation for the oil sector. It is worthy to mention that the Law number 10/4 establishes the access rule and execution of oil operations in the available surface and submerged areas of the national territory, the inland waters, the territorial sea, the exclusive economic zone, and the continental platform. The referred law has general principles as follows: public ownership of oil resources, exclusivity of the national concierge, CN, as holder of mining rights, and CN shall associate with national or foreign entities with proven technical and financial capacity upon a government authorization through a concession decree. Mandatory risk for partners, conditions for the execution of oil operations, prospecting license or a concession license, association mechanisms, commercial partnership, consortium contract, and production sharing agreement. It is important to mention that the application of the Petroleum Operations Law principles shall be made in accordance with the fiscal terms of Law number 13/4 of December 24th, Taxation Petroleum Activities Law. Since the referred law establishes the tax regime applicable to the exploration, development, production, storage, sale, export, treatment, and transportation of crude oil and natural gas. It is also worthy to mention that the taxes must be considered when signing a contract for the execution of oil operations in Angola. Those taxes are the petroleum income tax that is generated from exploration, development, production, storage, sales, treatment, and transportation activities, which the rate is 50% for production sharing contracts and 65.75% in service risk contracts. The surface tax applicable to the concession area or the DAs if established in a contract executed with the CN, which is at a rate of US $300 per square kilometer. The training tax contribution applicable to the members of the national concessionaire, suppliers of goods and services for oil companies, which the rate consists of annual contributions set out in number 2 of Article 12 of Decree Law number 17/09 of June 26th. And finally, we have the petroleum transaction tax, as well as the petroleum production tax, both not applicable under the 2020 ANPG bidding strategy, as production sharing contract is not subject to these taxes. It should also be noted that as in onshore bidding, the Decree number 120/8 of December 22nd on access to terrestrial areas establishes the rule for access to onshore areas and the acquisition of land rights in order to carry out petroleum operations, being the national concessionaire and the MERPET, the entities responsible for ensuring the execution of referred access in terms of the implementation of procedures provided for the application legislation as such. Decree number 120/8 of December 22nd on access to land areas. The Land Access Law, approved by Law number 9/4 of November 9th, as well as Decree number 58/7 of July 13th, approves the General Land Concession Regulation. With regards to the concession decree, we should mention that the referred document constitutes a formal instrument of the government, through which the concessionaire is awarded with a specific oil concession. Among other aspects, the concession decree defines allocation of mining rights, definition and description of the concession area, duration of the concession and the different phases and periods, operation identification, approval of the production sharing contract if the national concessionaire intends to be associated with a third party. Also note that under the legal framework applicable to the oil sector, we also have a special customs regime approved by Law number 11/4 of November 12th, Law on the Applicable Customs Regime in the Petroleum Sector, that establishes the customs regime by which the petroleum operations are governed in the areas under the jurisdiction of the Republic of Angola. It applies to the national concessionaire, its associates, and the entities that execute petroleum operations on their behalf. It is important to note that, among other aspects, the referred diploma establishes exemption from duties and service charges associated with the import and export of goods destined for oil operations, determines a list of goods exempt from taxation, allows the temporary import and export of goods referred to in the exemption list with no deposit required. However, the use of these assets for purposes other than those foreseen and declared constitutes an infraction punishable by law. For the execution of petroleum operations, the CN and its associates shall perceive the guidelines issued by the Angolan anti-corruption legislation and the international conventions according to the law, such as Law number 3/10 of March 29th. The Law on Public Probity establishes the basis in the legal regime related to public morality and respect for public assets by the public agent. Law number 5/20 of January 27th, the Law against money laundering, financing terrorism, and proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, establishes measures of a preventative and repressive nature to combat the money laundering, the financing of terrorism, and proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and principles described in the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, signed in Merida on October 31st, 2003, and which the effective date was December 14th, 2005. Under the legal framework reform of the oil sector, a set of legal instruments were approved in order to confer more advantages on investors and to promote investment in Angola. Presidential Decree number 86/18, which allows the simplification and acceleration of the process to grant the investor companies the status of national concessionaire associates, allowing more frequent promotion and licensing of concession areas, preserving the public interest. On the other hand, this decree also enlarged operator limits for contract approval for the acquisition of goods and services. In other words, the operator has the prerogative to acquire goods and services up to $5 million without the national concessionaire consent. Presidential Legislative Decree number 7/18, which allows the efficient use of gas reserves, promotes economic diversification, encourages the exploration of natural gas, and guarantees the necessary flexibility of commercial terms to ensure economic viability of gas projects. Presidential Legislative Decree number 5/18 authorizes the creation of a special regime that allows for additional exploration of the concession areas during the production period, permitting new discoveries in areas that reveal prospects which can maximize production levels in Angola. Presidential Decree number 91/18 allows the implementation of a specific regime for abandonment and decommissioning. the financing of the liabilities that will be via guarantee accounts, ensuring that the abandonment and decommissioning possessions are carried out in accordance with the best international practices. Presidential Legislative Decree No. 6/18, which defines tax incentives that create a positive impact on the economic viability of marginal discoveries. According to what has been exposed on the applicable legal regime, it can be concluded that the Angolan legal system is a very robust and attractive mechanism for investment regarding to onshore oil exploration and production activities, since it establishes precise rules to ensure access to land and the execution of petroleum operations. Therefore, we also state that Angola is unequivocally one of the geographies that offers the best investment conditions, given the legal and contractual flexibility associated with the legislative evolution registered over the last few years, as well as the improvements adopted in the operational area, the situation which makes the oil and gas industry more attractive in Angola, thus creating greater dynamism in the concession management process, greater flexibility in the award of contracts for the acquisition of goods and services in the sector, greater contractual and fiscal flexibility, greater contractual stability, improvement of oil operations, greater accuracy in the abandonment activity, reduction of geological risk. The bidding round process takes place under the terms of Article 44 of Law 10/4 of November 12th, which outlines a public tender whenever the national concessionaire intends to associate with entities for the execution of petroleum activities. Activities which should be conducted under the terms of the Presidential Decree 86/18 of April 2nd, which establishes the rules and procedures for the public tenders. For this purpose, a product sharing contract will be signed in order to regulate the relationship between the parties, ANPG, and contractor group. However, it is important to state that the production sharing contract have underlying concepts about the tax regimen and production sharing, which we will now illustrate. Total production is split in cost oil, which is cost recovery, and profit oil shared between the contractor group and national concessionaire. The oil cost is the maximum limit of crude oil used for cost recovery, produced and in each development area, and profit oil is the difference between the total production and the recovery oil. Regarding the cost oil, it is important to note that all investments made by the investors can be recovered if there is success in finding oil. The following costs will be recovered in the following order: operation expenses at 100%, development costs at 25% with uplift, operating costs 100%, the associated risk that companies must assume in the research phase, but which, if successful, will be recoverable. If there is a surplus, it shall be transferred to the profit oil that is split between the national concessionaire and the contractor group, according to the corresponding participation of the companies and the variation of the internal rate of return. Each of the companies of the contractor group shall pay the petroleum income tax according to the participation, being 50% for international companies and 35% for national. For instance, if total production is 200 MMBO, considering that 60% of the production is for oil cost and 40% of the production is for oil profit, the contractor group will pay only PIT on oil profit 80 MMBO, with international companies paying 40 MMBO and national companies paying 28 MMBO. And amortization by development cost will be 25% per year for a period of 4 years. Companies that enroll in the 2020 bidding process and wish to candidate as operator and non-operator are required to pay an entry fee in the amount of $1 million, non-refundable, and will be granted to all data and accessibility information existing in the national concessionaire regarding the blocks to be on bid. 120 days following the pre-announcement, another announcement of the official launch of the tender will be published on the 30th of April, with the terms of reference and the rules of procedure of the tender. The terms of reference will include negotiable and non-negotiable items, including minimum work program, signature bonus, contributions to social projects, cost oil, uplift, financing from Sonangol P&P, carry 20%. Proposals must be submitted up to 40 days after the tender launch, the 9th of June, and should be submitted in Portuguese or in any other language, provided that it is accompanied by the official translation into Portuguese in a closed and sealed envelope until 5:00 p.m. on that day. All documents submitted after the 9th of June will not be accepted. The opening of the proposal will be made on the first working day immediately after the date of submission of the proposals, in this case being the 10th of June, where the proposals and the terms of reference will be read in a public act. The qualification of the companies and evaluation of the proposals must be concluded 45 days after the opening of the proposals, that is, the 26th of July, where the companies that apply as operator and non-operator will be evaluated according to their technical and financial capacity. In this regard, proposals are evaluated based on the weight that is assigned to each item in the terms of reference, and the block will be awarded to the companies that have the highest score. The results will be communicated 20 days after the award of concessions, that is, the 10th of April, in the national and international media. A negotiation committee is set up 5 days after the award, whose role is to negotiate the contract to be signed. As a final step, and following the approval of the Council of Ministers, a ceremony event is held where the contract is signed between the ANPG chairman of the board and the contractor group. In conclusion, the Roadshow has introduced the Bidding 2020 of the onshore basins of the Lower Congo and Kwanzaa. We are convinced that investors from the oil and gas industry have a clear view of the potential that exists in our country. And considering the latest statistics of the legislative evolution registered over the past few years, Angola is one of the few regions in the world that offers the safest investment conditions regarding legal and contractual flexibility. Ladies and gentlemen, investors from all over the world, this has been the Roadshow Bidding 2020. Welcome to Angola.